She hadn't spoken to anyone in almost 2 years until a dying dog and her puppy showed up at her door. The world outside Dr. Meredith Lane's cabin had turned into a silent ocean of white, the Montana winter swallowing everything in slow, relentless waves. The wind howled through the pines and battered the old timber walls, but inside, the only sound was the crackle of a tired wood stove and the shuffle of Meredith's slippered feet on worn floorboards. Every clock in the house had stopped ticking. The calendar, still stuck on the month she'd lost her family, was yellowed at the edges. She kept to a careful routine: coffee, a single slice of toast, a radio she never turned on, and then hours with her battered medical books. She read, but she didn't see the words. Sometimes she wrote in the margins, notes for no one. Sometimes she stared through the frost-etched window at the world she no longer belonged to. On that night, the storm was particularly vicious, the kind that erased all traces of the road and made even the memory of neighbors feel like a half-remembered dream. Meredith was preparing for bed, wrapping her cardigan tighter around her when she heard it. A sound out of place, raw and desperate. At first, she tried to ignore it. Animals wandered the mountains, but the noise came again, a sharp, panicked whimper, then a heavy thud. It was enough to drag her from the warmth and back to the door. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle. Opening the door was not something she did lightly, but that sound. She couldn't turn her back on it. When she finally pulled the door open, the wind nearly tore it from her grip. Snow whipped into the cabin, stinging her face. She squinted into the darkness, flashlight trembling in her hand, and saw something slumped against the porch steps. Two shapes. A large one and a tiny, motionless bundle curled beneath it. She stepped forward. The larger animal, a German shepherd, bared her teeth weakly, too exhausted to bark. Her fur was matted with ice and blood, sides heaving with each ragged breath. Underneath her, a puppy barely bigger than Meredith's fist lay sprawled on the frozen wood, unmoving except for the faintest rise and fall of its chest. For a moment, Meredith froze, her mind locking into old, abandoned reflexes. She'd sworn she'd never practice medicine again. But there, under the porch light, the boundary between past and present blurred. She was a doctor, and there was life that needed saving. She knelt carefully, speaking in a low, steady voice. Out of habit, more than hope. "Hey there. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The shepherd's ears flattened, but she didn't attack. Meredith slipped off her scarf, using it to gently scoop up the puppy. Its body was limp, frighteningly cold. She looked up at the mother. "I'm taking your baby inside. You can come too if you want." She backed into the cabin, holding the puppy close, leaving the door open behind her. After a pause, the shepherd staggered in, collapsing just inside the threshold. She kept her eyes locked on Meredith the whole time. Meredith moved quickly, falling into the rhythms of a life she'd buried. She laid the puppy on a folded towel by the stove, grabbing her old trauma kit from beneath the kitchen sink. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline she hadn't felt in years. She checked the puppy's pulse, breathing, pupils. She wrapped it in another towel, pressing it close to her own body for warmth. The power flickered, then died completely. The cabin plunged into shadow. Meredith didn't hesitate. She grabbed candles and matches from the drawer and set them around her workspace, creating islands of flickering gold light. She cleaned a shallow gash on the puppy's side. Its breathing was thin, reedy, barely there. She pressed on, gently massaging its chest, willing its heart to keep beating. Behind her, the shepherd whimpered, claws scraping on the wood as she tried to rise. I know. I'm trying." A surge of memory rushed over her. Nights in the ER, mothers clinging to hope, the relentless fight against time. She poured her entire soul into reviving the tiny life before her. Minutes crawled by, the wind outside pounding, the dog's mother panting with worry. Then, with a shudder, the puppy coughed. Uh, Meredith nearly cried out. It opened its mouth, letting out a weak, wavering squeak, then squirmed in her hands. That's it. Come on, little one. For the first time in years, Meredith felt a spark, a stubborn, desperate hope. She wrapped the puppy tightly, tucking it against her chest, and sat back on her heels, exhausted. The shepherd, watching every move, finally dragged herself closer and nudged Meredith's knee with her nose. It was a gesture of trust, or maybe a plea. You did good. You're a good mom, Meredith murmured, running her fingers gently over the dog's battered ears. She checked the shepherd next, finding a jagged wound along her side, as if she'd torn herself free from something. Meredith cleaned it, her hands steady even as her mind raced. Just hold on, okay? You both made it through the worst of it. She worked for over an hour, her movements guided by muscle memory and instinct. The puppy, now gently snoring, curled against her lap, and the shepherd, exhausted, let her head rest on Meredith's foot. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something shifted. Meredith sat in the candlelit silence, her breath fogging in the cold air. Two lives tethered to hers by chance, or fate. She hadn't meant to open her door to the world again, but tonight, the world had come to her, desperate and pleading, wrapped in fur and hope. She glanced at the dog and her puppy, realizing she'd have to give them names. Names meant attachment. Attachment meant risk, but she couldn't help it. For the first time in years, she felt less alone. In the flicker of candlelight, with the storm howling at the walls and two survivors pressed close to her side, Dr. Meredith Lane finally whispered into the darkness, "Welcome home." The silence after the storm was almost as heavy as the blizzard itself. Dawn filtered through the frosted windows, painting the cabin with a cold blue light. Meredith hadn't slept. She sat slouched beside the stove, still wrapped in her cardigan, arms cradling the puppy, who trembled occasionally, but had stopped whimpering through the darkest hours. Beside her, the shepherd mother, now tentatively trusting but vigilant, kept a steady gaze fixed on every move Meredith made. Meredith listened to their breathing. Every slight shift in rhythm made her pulse jump. It was all muscle memory, old habits reignited. She found herself counting the puppy's breaths per minute, checking capillary refill, monitoring the wound on the mother's side. She told herself she'd left this life behind, that there would be no more urgent decisions, no more hands slicked with blood, no more wrenching fear that each moment could mean the difference between life and death. But here she was. The world had brought medicine back to her doorstep, and she hadn't hesitated. The power hadn't returned. The cold pressed into the corners of the cabin. Meredith moved the puppy and his mother closer to the stove, improvising a nest out of towels, a flannel shirt, and the faded baby blanket she'd kept for reasons she'd never admitted to herself. She forced herself to talk. Talking helped the animals, but mostly it helped her. "It's just us right now, you know? I think you know that, don't you?" Her voice cracked. "You look like you've been alone for a long time, too." She knelt to check the shepherd's wound again. Under the caked blood, she found something that made her frown, a faint, puckered line just above the flank. A scar, recent and ugly, as if the dog had torn herself from wire or a chain. There was something else, too. An odd, faint brand, almost invisible beneath the thick fur, a symbol that nagged at Meredith's memory. "Someone did this to you. Not nature," she muttered. The shepherd's eyes darted away at the touch. The puppy stirred and gave a high, hiccuping whine, which brought the mother instantly to alert. Meredith pulled her hands away, letting the mother nuzzle the puppy, the two pressing close for warmth and comfort. Watching them, something inside Meredith began to thaw. She moved around the kitchen, scavenging for supplies, old saline packets, bandages from her emergency kit, a chipped bowl for water. The ritual of caregiving took over, gentle hands, soft voice, methodical actions. By mid-morning, the puppy was alert enough to try and nurse, his tiny mouth seeking out his mother's belly. The shepherd, with a sigh of what might have been relief, allowed it. Her body still tense but less rigid than before. Meredith watched, shoulders unclenching for the first time in hours. "You need names?" she said quietly, settling on the floor across from them. "I can't just call you Mom and Baby forever, right?" The mother glanced up at her, almost as if she understood. Meredith considered for a moment, then spoke with gentle certainty. You look like a Luna. That fits you. And this little one?" She stroked the puppy's tiny head, his fur softer than anything she'd touched in years. "River. Because you survived the storm. Because you keep moving forward even when you're almost swept away." For the first time since the world had fallen apart, Meredith found herself smiling, a real, if fragile, smile. But reality pressed back in quickly. She had to keep them safe, warm, and fed, and she didn't know how long the power would be out. The cold could kill a weak animal as surely as any injury. She layered extra wood into the stove, stoking it until the metal glowed. She scavenged the pantry for what little canned meat she had left and mixed it with water for Luna, who wolfed it down in frantic, hungry gulps. Outside, the snow still drifted and the wind still moaned, but for the first time, Meredith felt a sense of purpose. She listened to Luna's heart. Strong despite everything, she watched River breathe. The tremors fading, color coming back into his lips. By late afternoon, Meredith was exhausted. She set up a nest for herself on the floor, unwilling to leave Luna and River alone, even for a minute. She lay down, closing her eyes, telling herself she'd just rest for a moment. Sleep took her quickly, but it wasn't restful. She dreamed in fragments. Memories of the ER, alarms blaring, hands slick with blood, faces she couldn't save. Oh, her husband's laugh, her son's smile, the moment her world had shattered. She heard a dog barking, a real bark, not a memory, and jerked awake. Luna was standing over her, hackles up, body stiff with tension. River huddled behind her. Meredith forced herself upright, heart thudding. What is it? What's wrong? She listened, holding her breath. The cabin was quiet, except for the wind and the ticking of melting icicles falling from the eaves. She crept to the window and peered out. The world was blindingly white. Nothing moved except a few crows circling above the treetops. Still, Luna didn't relax. "It's okay, girl," Meredith whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure. "It's just the wind. Or maybe the memory of something worse." She sat back down, stroking Luna's fur, feeling the dog's shivering muscles. Meredith realized her own hands were shaking too. To distract herself, Meredith began to talk again. She told Luna and River about her family. Not in detail, not the kind of things you share with another person, but just enough for the ache in her chest to ease. She talked about the hospital, about old cases, about the way hope sometimes slipped in through the smallest cracks. She told them, I think maybe you saved me as much as I saved you." As the sky faded into dusk, the power flickered once, then twice, before finally stuttering back to life. The lights came on, harsh and sudden. Meredith shielded her eyes, blinking in the glare. Luna whined. River startled, but both relaxed as the warmth from the heater began to spread through the small cabin. Meredith's exhaustion finally caught up with her. She curled up on the floor, Luna pressed against her back, River tucked between them. For the first time in years, she felt herself surrendering, not to despair, but to a strange, cautious hope. Just before sleep reclaimed her, Meredith heard her own voice, soft and amazed. "We're going to make it, aren't we?" No one answered, but in the warm circle of light and safety, it was enough. The sun crept slowly over the Montana mountains, filling Meredith's cabin with weak winter light. Night had faded, but the fear from the storm and the memories it stirred lingered in the corners of the small, cluttered room. Meredith lay still on the floor, feeling the gentle weight of River pressed against her side and the warmth of Luna's heavy head on her feet. She hadn't slept this soundly in years, and when she woke, it was to the soft, rhythmic sound of a puppy nursing and Luna's steady breathing. For a moment, Meredith let herself drift, feeling almost human again. almost like someone with a future. River wriggled awake first, crawling over the crumpled blankets, his tiny pink tongue seeking comfort. Luna stretched and stood, shaking snow and sleep from her thick black fur. Meredith watched them, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You too," she said softly. "You're really something, aren't you?" It was the first time in nearly 2 years that she'd heard her own voice break the morning silence. The words felt rusty, uncertain, but they filled the air with something she hadn't known she missed: hope, company. Meredith stood, knees stiff from the cold floor. She filled a bowl with warm water for Luna, who lapped it up greedily, then nudged it toward River, who tried to mimic his mother, but managed only to splash water everywhere. Meredith couldn't help but laugh, a small, startled sound that made Luna's ears perk up. With the sun up, Meredith checked Luna's wound again. It was healing, though the gash along her flank was jagged, surrounded by old scars and that strange, almost invisible brand. As Meredith dabbed antiseptic gently across the injury, Luna tensed, but didn't pull away. Trust was growing, thin as spider silk, but stronger every day. "You're brave," Meredith murmured. "Braver than I've been." She spent the morning tending to her unexpected guests. She made scrambled eggs for herself and shared some with Luna, who wolfed them down as if she'd never tasted real food. River, still too little for anything but milk, watched with wide eyes, his tiny tail wagging. There were chores to do. Meredith had to chop wood for the stove, shovel snow from the path, and check on the supplies in her shed. She was halfway through filling a bucket of water at the old pump when she realized she was narrating her actions, out loud, as if Luna and River could understand. "Gotta keep the water warm so nobody gets sick. Need to check the oil for the generator. And maybe bake some bread?" Her voice echoed in the still air. And to her surprise, Luna followed her, River waddling behind. The three moved as a pack, bound together by something wordless and essential. Inside, Meredith found herself talking even more. She told Luna and River about her old life in the city, about the constant rush and chaos of the ER, about how she used to dream of escaping to the mountains. She didn't mention why she'd come here, not yet, but she spoke of the small joys she used to take for granted. Fresh bread, hot coffee, the way the sky looked just before dawn. Luna watched her with solemn, intelligent eyes. River gnawed on her shoelaces as if to say, "Don't stop, keep talking." Naming them had changed everything. Names made them family. Meredith was beginning to feel it, a slow thaw in her chest, the first tentative steps toward healing. After lunch, she settled on the floor to brush Luna's fur, picking out burrs and tangles. The shepherd tensed whenever Meredith's fingers passed over the brand or an old scar, but she stayed. Each touch was a promise. "I see you. I know you've suffered. You're safe now." River, full of boundless energy, tumbled over his mother's paws, barking his high, squeaky bark. Meredith couldn't help herself. She reached for an old tennis ball, a relic from another life, and rolled it across the floor. River pounced, missing by a mile, then skidded into the wall, making Luna jump. Meredith laughed again, louder this time. The sound startled her. She felt like she was waking up from a long, dark sleep. By evening, the three of them had settled into a rhythm. Meredith cooked a simple stew and fed Luna scraps. River nursed, then curled up in Meredith's lap, sighing with contentment. For the first time since she'd arrived in Montana, Meredith left the door unlocked, trusting that Luna would warn her of any danger. The cabin no longer felt like a tomb. It felt alive. As darkness crept in, a strange sound caught Meredith's attention, a distant crack, like a branch snapping under heavy weight. She froze, heart hammering. Luna shot to her feet, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in her chest. River whimpered and pressed close to Meredith. "Easy, girl?" Meredith whispered, her own voice trembling. She peered out the window, but saw only snow and the long black shadows of the trees. The sense of being watched crawled over her skin. Luna growled again, louder this time. Meredith reached for the old baseball bat she kept by the door, a habit from her days in the city, a habit she'd never thought she'd need out here. Minutes ticked by. The silence was deafening. Finally, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Luna relaxed, though she remained by the door, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. Meredith tried to shake off the feeling of unease. She returned to the stove, tossing another log onto the fire, but she couldn't forget the way Luna's body had gone rigid, the primal warning in her growl. That night, after River had fallen asleep beside the stove, Meredith sat in the quiet, stroking Luna's head. "You're not just protecting him, are you?" she whispered. "You're protecting me too." She realized, suddenly and sharply, that she wanted to protect them in return. And as the wind howled and the snow piled up against the windows, Meredith closed her eyes and made herself a promise. She would not turn away from these animals. Not now. Not ever. They were hers, and she was theirs. The old dead part of her heart flickered back to life. For the first time since the accident, she let herself imagine tomorrow. And for the first time in years, tomorrow didn't feel so empty. The days after the storm slipped by, each one blending quietly into the next. Meredith, Luna, and River began to fall into a pattern, a kind of gentle, fragile normalcy. Every morning the cabin warmed with the scent of coffee and the steady crackle of logs on the fire. Meredith's voice no longer sounded foreign in her own ears. She talked constantly to Luna and River, the way someone talks to children or to ghosts they hope might be listening. The wounds on Luna's side healed slowly, leaving behind the angry, twisted scar. Meredith checked it each morning, brushing the dog's thick black fur aside, her fingers brushing over that odd, faint brand again and again. The symbol nagged at her, almost familiar, but always just out of reach. Luna never flinched when Meredith tended to her now. She trusted her, absolutely, and watched her every move with solemn, intelligent eyes. But as the winter pressed on, strange things began to happen around the cabin. It started with small things. Luna growling at the window at night, a River waking with whimpers that made Meredith's heart ache. Sometimes, in the gray pre-dawn hours, Luna would stand at the door, every muscle tense, ears up and tail rigid. Meredith would listen, but all she ever heard was the wind. Then, one morning, as she shoveled the walkway, Meredith spotted something odd at the edge of the clearing, a patch of disturbed snow, ragged and churned up, as if someone or something had lingered there in the night. It was probably just a deer, she told herself, or an elk wandering through in the storm. But Luna's reaction was immediate and fierce, and the shepherd stood between Meredith and the trees, every hair raised along her back, a deep growl vibrating in her chest. "Easy," Meredith said softly, kneeling down and placing a hand on Luna's side. She felt the dog's heartbeat pounding beneath her palm. "It's just the forest, girl. It's just the snow." But the unease didn't go away. That afternoon, as Meredith chopped wood near the shed, she noticed something strange pressed into the snow. It's a boot print, and clear and unmistakable. Her heart jolted. It wasn't just any boot print. It was big, deep, and fresh. As she bent closer, the tread was unfamiliar, not like any of the old boots she wore, not the kind you'd expect from a local hunter. There were no tire tracks, no other prints, just a single set, as if someone had stood and watched for a long, long time. Meredith straightened, suddenly aware of how alone she was, how isolated. The closest neighbor was miles away, and she hadn't spoken to anyone but Luna and River in almost 2 years. She forced herself to finish stacking the wood, but her eyes darted constantly to the tree line. Luna stayed glued to her side, silent and alert. That night, the sense of being watched grew stronger. The cabin felt smaller than ever, every shadow a threat. Meredith tried to tell herself it was just the isolation, the long winter playing tricks on her mind. She checked every lock on the doors and windows, then dragged a chair in front of the door and slept fitfully on the couch. River curled on her stomach. Luna sprawled on the rug, head pointed toward the door. But sleep was thin and restless. In her dreams, she heard River's cries, sharp and desperate, echoing through the dark. She saw Luna flinch at sounds, boots on gravel, the clink of metal, distant shouts, and woke with her heart racing. The next morning, she checked the yard for signs of intrusion. Nothing at first. Then she noticed something chilling. Another boot print, this one even closer, just beneath her kitchen window. The snow had only fallen lightly overnight. Whoever it was, they'd been there just hours ago. Meredith felt the old instinct, the ER doctor's clarity in crisis, kick in. She scanned the trees, the shed, the whole perimeter. She made a circuit of the cabin, Luna beside her, and found nothing else. But the sense of violation was there. Someone was coming too close. Inside, she locked the doors, her mind racing. Why would someone be here? Who would trek through miles of snow just to lurk in the woods? She replayed every detail. Luna's scars, the brand, the way River cried at night, the odd questions she'd avoided asking herself. Was someone looking for these dogs? Meredith knelt beside Luna, running a hand through her fur. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. Luna pressed her nose against Meredith's chest, a low, keening sound rising from her throat. She forced herself to think. If someone was searching for Luna and River, it wasn't for anything good. She remembered stories from the news. Abused animals, illegal fighting rings, even rumors about government testing on dogs. She thought about Luna's terror, her mother's fierce protectiveness, and the way River flinched at sudden sounds. That afternoon, as the sky turned violet with sunset, Meredith made a decision. She moved her emergency radio to the kitchen table, dusting off the old receiver. She tested the battery, listening to the scratchy hiss of static. If anything happened, if someone tried to get in, she'd call for help, no matter how much it cost her pride. She slept badly again, haunted by nightmares she couldn't shake. The next day, she found something else. River, always so playful, woke her with a series of panicked cries, his little body trembling violently. Luna paced in circles, whining, her eyes wild. It took an hour to calm them both down, and even then, neither would leave her side. Later, when she examined Luna more closely, Meredith found scars she hadn't seen before. Old wounds, healed badly, crisscrossing the dog's side. Luna flinched at the touch, then pressed closer, as if begging not to be left alone. Meredith's sense of dread deepened. She was a healer, not a fighter. But she understood now. Someone had hurt Luna, maybe was still looking for her, and she would not let that happen again. That night, Meredith double-checked every lock and settled onto the floor, baseball bat within reach. Luna and River curled tightly against her. The storm was over, but a new kind of fear had crept in with the snow. In the darkness, Meredith whispered to them, "I don't know who's out there, but I promise I won't let them hurt you again." Outside, the wind rattled the windows. But inside, the bond between woman and dogs, scarred, battered, but unbroken, was stronger than ever. The cold felt sharper that morning, biting through the seams of the cabin and making every breath hang in the air like mist. Meredith tried to focus on her routines, feeding Luna and River, bringing in firewood, checking for more footprints in the snow, but anxiety sat like a stone in her stomach. She kept thinking about those tracks, so fresh and close, and the scars on Luna's flank. Someone out there wanted them back, and she didn't know how far they would go. Around noon, as she sat by the stove with a mug of tea, a crunch of snow startled her. Meredith tensed, her body on high alert. Luna shot upright, her head snapping toward the door, and River let out a thin, uncertain whine. Meredith looked out the frosted window. At first she saw nothing but the endless white. Then a shape appeared, a man, bundled in a heavy parka, snow up to his knees, a neon orange badge glinting at his chest. He trudged through the clearing, not in any hurry, his gloved hand raised in a cautious wave. Meredith's heart hammered. She quickly moved River and Luna behind her, then cracked the door just enough to see the stranger. "Can I help you?" she called, keeping her voice steady. The man stopped several feet from the porch, careful not to come any closer than necessary. "Ma'am, sorry to bother you. Name's Robson, Wildlife Control. Got a call about a missing animal in the area. Mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Meredith's eyes flicked to his badge. It looked real, but her gut twisted with unease. She had lived in these mountains long enough to know the local authorities, and she'd never seen Robson before. Luna pressed against her leg, a low growl rumbling in her chest. "What kind of animal?" Meredith asked, feigning disinterest. Robson glanced past her, as if trying to see inside. "Oh, we're searching for a black German shepherd with a puppy. Reports say they got loose during the storm. Guys, dangerous animals, ma'am. Could be sick, might be aggressive. We want to make sure everyone stays safe." Meredith's mouth went dry. She shook her head. "I haven't seen any dogs, just the usual deer and foxes. Sorry, I can't help you." Robson's eyes narrowed just a bit. "You sure? Oh, folks up here sometimes take in strays. No shame in it. But we need to keep an eye on disease. You understand?" She kept her face blank. "No dogs here? Just me." A pause stretched between them. Meredith's grip on the door tightened. Behind her, Luna's hackles bristled and River whimpered quietly. Robson nodded, but didn't leave. Instead, he peered at the porch, at the scattered paw prints frozen in the snow. "You been out here long?" he asked casually. Meredith forced herself to meet his gaze. "2 winters. Why?" He shrugged. "People get lonely out here. Sometimes they keep secrets, even from themselves." He offered a thin smile, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Well, you let us know if you see anything unusual, all right?" She nodded and started to close the door, but Robson spoke again. "Last thing, mind if I check your shed? Sometimes dogs hole up in there, get scared, in the cold." Meredith's heart skipped. She shook her head firmly. "No need. The shed's locked. Nothing in there but tools and old firewood." He hesitated, then raised both hands as if to placate her. "All right, ma'am. No trouble. Just doing my job." He turned and walked away, but not before glancing back once, eyes lingering on the edge of the porch, where a single black hair clung to a splinter. Meredith shut the door and locked it with trembling hands. Her mind raced. Luna pressed close, River whining in confusion. "Shh. It's all right," she whispered, but she didn't believe it. She grabbed the emergency radio, checking for a signal, then set it back on the table with a sigh. And there was nothing but static. No help would come quickly out here. She spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze of anxiety, peering through the curtains at the tree line, jumping at every sound. Luna never left her side, and River, sensing the tension, stayed curled in a tight ball beneath the kitchen table. Night fell early, as it always did in the deep winter. Meredith secured every window and door, moved a heavy chair in front of the back entrance, and kept the baseball bat within reach. She set extra logs in the stove, the firelight throwing long shadows across the walls. She tried to distract herself by reading, but the words danced on the page, refusing to settle. Every few minutes, she got up to check the windows, scanning for any sign of movement outside. It was after midnight when she heard it, the crunch of footsteps on snow, slower and more deliberate than before. Meredith's breath caught. She stood, motionless, listening as the steps moved toward the shed. She grabbed her flashlight and peered through a crack in the curtain. Robson was back. This time, he carried a heavy flashlight of his own, its beam slicing through the darkness. He moved around the side of the shed, pausing to shine the light inside through a warped board. Meredith felt her stomach lurch. She slipped the baseball bat into her hand and moved silently to the back door. Luna was at her side, rigid and silent, eyes burning with a protective fury. River whimpered softly, but Meredith pressed a finger to her lips. Robson circled the shed, trying the latch. Finding it locked, he moved to the back window, prying at the frame with a gloved hand. Meredith felt panic surge through her. If he forced his way inside, what would he do if he found anything? She took a deep breath, steadied herself, then opened the back door just a crack. "Can I help you?" she called, her voice clear and cold in the night. Robson spun, his flashlight landing on her face. For a split second, she saw the irritation flicker in his eyes before he smiled. "Sorry, ma'am. Just checking for those animals. I didn't mean to scare you." She didn't move from the threshold. "I told you, there are no dogs here. You're trespassing." He took a slow step back. "Just doing my job, ma'am." She slammed the door and locked it. Heart racing, Meredith retreated to the kitchen, hands shaking. Luna pressed against her, and River began to cry. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat by the fire, bat across her knees, watching the window, until the sky began to lighten. She knew one thing for certain. Whoever Robson was, he wasn't from wildlife control. He was looking for Luna and River, and he wouldn't give up easily. As dawn broke over the snow-blanketed woods, Meredith made a silent vow. She would keep her family safe, no matter what it cost. Meredith's mind was a fog of anxiety and exhaustion. Daylight did nothing to calm her nerves. She made a show of tending to chores, feeding Luna and River, clearing a path to the shed, but all the while, her senses strained for any sign of Robson. She kept the baseball bat within reach, her emergency radio charged and ready, and her phone tucked in her jacket, even though she knew there'd be no signal for miles. Every window seemed like a possible threat, every sound a warning. By mid-morning, the sense of unease intensified. Luna stayed pressed close to her side, her body language tense and unyielding, while River seemed to pick up on the fear, hiding beneath a blanket and whimpering at every unfamiliar noise. Meredith checked every lock, then double-checked them, her eyes darting to the edge of the woods every few minutes. She tried to steady herself by focusing on small things, making tea, brushing Luna, reading to River, but every so often she would catch herself staring into the flickering shadows, the baseball bat resting across her knees, and wondered just how far she'd go to protect these animals. Twilight arrived early, the sky darkening with a promise of more snow. Meredith stood at the kitchen window, watching the last light fade from the sky, when Luna stiffened at her feet. The shepherd's ears shot up, and she let out a single, low growl, a sound that made the hair on Meredith's neck stand on end. She followed Luna's gaze. At first, she saw nothing, but then a flicker of movement caught her eye at the tree line. A faint beam of a flashlight, weaving among the shadows. Meredith's heart lurched. She grabbed River, clutching the squirming puppy close to her chest, and whispered, "Shh, stay quiet, please." She moved swiftly, her mind running through every emergency protocol she'd ever known. She set River inside a deep cupboard with a blanket, closed the door just enough for air, then turned her full attention to Luna. The dog stood rigid, tail low, teeth bared and ready. Meredith pulled her tranquilizer kit from the emergency supplies, old syringes and a few precious vials left over from her days as a trauma doctor. She'd hoped never to use them again. But as Robson's footsteps crunched closer, she loaded a syringe with trembling hands. A shadow passed across the window. The door rattled, then the handle turned, locked. Meredith held her breath. Robson's voice, muffled but clear, called through the door. "Ma'am, I just need to talk. Open up." She didn't answer. There was a pause. Then the sound of metal scraping on wood, the unmistakable noise of a crowbar prying at the back door. Luna exploded into barking, hurling herself at the door with a violence that startled even Meredith. She heard the wood crack, the hinges strain. The door shook, but held. Robson cursed, loud and ugly, on the other side. Meredith's mind raced. She needed time. She shoved a heavy chair against the door, then moved silently toward the kitchen, grabbing the radio and dialing in the emergency frequency. Static. She tried again. "This is Dr. Meredith Lane at 87 Ridgeway. Emergency home invasion?" Static swallowed her voice. Robson shouted, "Just give me the dogs. Nobody has to get hurt." Meredith's hands shook. She drew Luna to her side and knelt. "Stay," she whispered, and Luna held perfectly still, every muscle quivering with readiness. A window shattered, the sharp, crystalline sound of glass breaking in the night. Meredith spun to see Robson's gloved hand reach in, scrabbling for the lock. Before she could react, Luna launched herself at the window, teeth flashing. Robson's hand jerked back. He grunted in pain. "Damn animal." The next thing Meredith knew, Robson had forced the window open wide enough to climb through. He staggered inside, flashlight beam bouncing wildly, crowbar raised. His eyes were wild, desperate, and fixated on Luna. Meredith stepped into the light, holding the loaded syringe in one hand, the baseball bat in the other. "Don't come any closer," she shouted, voice shaking but loud. Robson sneered. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. That dog is government property," Luna snarled, planting herself protectively in front of Meredith. Robson lunged. Luna leapt, her jaws snapping, catching Robson's arm and wrenching him sideways. He howled, swinging the crowbar, but Luna's grip was iron. Meredith seized the opening. She rushed in, plunging the syringe deep into Robson's thigh. He staggered, cursing, trying to shake Luna off, but the tranquilizer worked fast. Within seconds, his movement slowed, then grew clumsy. He swung again, missed, and collapsed against the wall, slumping to the floor. For a heartbeat, everything was silent, except for Luna's heavy panting and the distant, terrified whimpers of River. Meredith moved quickly. She grabbed a length of rope from the hall closet, her hands moving on autopilot. She tied Robson's wrists behind his back, then his ankles, double-checking the knots the way she'd once been taught to secure panicked trauma patients. And when she was sure he wouldn't wake soon, she dragged him, heavy, awkward, and unconscious, down to the root cellar, locking the door with a trembling hand. Her breath came in short, shaky gasps. She hurried back to the kitchen, falling to her knees and pulling River from his hiding place. The puppy licked her face, whining, and Luna pressed against her, trembling but alive. "It's over. For now," Meredith whispered, clutching both animals to her chest. She sat that way for a long time, letting the adrenaline drain from her body, the realization of what she'd done slowly sinking in. Eventually, when her hands were steady enough, she picked up the emergency radio again. This time, her voice was calm and clear. "This is Dr. Meredith Lane. I've been attacked in my home. I have an intruder secured. Send help, please. 87 Ridgeway, Northridge." The radio crackled. A voice answered, faint but real. "Copy that, Dr. Lane. Help is on the way. Stay safe." Meredith slumped against the wall, closing her eyes in relief. The nightmare wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt something fierce burning inside her. A survivor's determination. She'd kept her promise. She'd protected her family. Outside, the night was silent again. Inside, 3 survivors, woman, mother, and child, huddled close, bound by fear, courage, and the promise of a new beginning. The hours after the attack crawled by in a blur of adrenaline and icy dread. Meredith paced her small cabin, River tucked into her arms and Luna never more than a few steps away. Every sound outside made her heart hammer, but the woods had settled into a heavy, snow-muffled stillness. She kept checking the root cellar, shining her flashlight through the vent, making sure Robson was still there, breathing, but out cold, bound, and harmless for now. She'd cleaned Luna's muzzle with trembling hands, whispering soothing nonsense as she wiped away the blood, not Luna's, but Robson's, where she'd bitten him, defending her family. Meredith's chest swelled with pride and a pinch of guilt. She never would have chosen violence. But in that moment, Luna had been her shield. She waited for hours, exhaustion and vigilance warring inside her. The radio hissed and crackled, the voice on the other end assuring her that help was on the way. But in Montana's deep winter, on the way meant a long wait. She kept the bat close and her phone at hand, just in case. Dawn finally broke. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp blue sky and a world blanketed in untouched snow. Meredith checked the doors and windows. No new tracks, no sign of anyone else. For a moment she let herself hope it was over. A few hours later, the wail of a siren cut through the silence, and a string of emergency vehicles crunched down her long frozen drive. She saw the flash of red and blue lights reflecting off the snow, and relief nearly buckled her knees. The sheriff, A no-nonsense woman named Deputy Eliza Park approached with 2 officers and a pair of animal control specialists in tow. Meredith met them outside, River tucked against her chest and Luna glued to her side. Deputy Park's eyes went from the battered door to the bruises on Meredith's arm to Luna's protective stance. "Dr. Lane, you called about an intruder?" the deputy asked. Meredith nodded. "He's in my root cellar, still breathing, but you might want to keep an eye on him when he wakes up." Park gave a low whistle and sent her deputies to check. The animal control officers, both wary and fascinated, knelt to examine Luna. One of them, a man with silver hair and a calm voice, gently patted Luna's head. "Well, aren't you a beauty?" he murmured, then frowned as his hands found the scars and the strange, barely visible brand. He exchanged a look with his colleague. "I've seen something like this before, not from around here." He stood, brushing snow from his knees. "Mind if we talk inside, Dr. Lane?" Inside, with the stove blazing and coffee brewing, Meredith recounted everything, how Luna and River had arrived, the signs of abuse, Robson's questions, and his threats about the dogs being government property. As she spoke, one of the animal control specialists, Sarah, quietly photographed Luna's scars and the brand, while the other called into their office with the details. Deputy Park took careful notes, her eyes never leaving Meredith's face. "Robson's not on any wildlife control roster. In fact, his badge is fake. We'll run his prints, but my gut says he's been after these animals for a reason. That has nothing to do with public safety." Sarah, the animal control officer, spoke up. "We just got a call back from our national coordinator. There's an active investigation out of Colorado about an illegal government-funded breeding program. Experimental? Off the books. They were using dogs, especially German Shepherds, for pain response training and behavioral research. There were rumors about escapees, but no one could find any trace." She looked down at Luna, who met her gaze with deep, unblinking eyes. "It looks like you found one." Meredith stared, the pieces snapping together in her mind, the scars, the flinches, the terror at certain noises. Luna hadn't just been abused, she'd been experimented on. "And River?" Meredith's voice was thin with dread. Sarah nodded. "From what we know, some of the escapees were pregnant. It's possible River was born in hiding, away from the worst of it. Luna must have protected him, kept him alive. That's a miracle, Dr. Lane." Luna pressed her head into Meredith's lap, seeking comfort. Meredith stroked her gently, feeling a hot ache of grief and fury for all the suffering this animal had endured. "She's not just a survivor," Meredith said softly. "She's a mother. She saved him. And she saved me." Deputy Park's voice was gentle. "You did a hell of a thing, standing up for them." Meredith shook her head. "They stood up for me." The officials began their work, photographing evidence, taking DNA samples from Luna's fur, securing Robson for transport. Meredith watched it all with a strange detachment, a part of her amazed at how quickly the world could change. As the investigation unfolded, one of the officers explained more. "These programs are usually run in secret. Someone got nervous when Luna and her pup escaped. They must have sent Robson to recover them quietly, no paperwork, no questions asked. That's why he was so desperate and so dangerous." Meredith shivered, pulling Luna and River closer. The thought of what they'd endured, the cages, the experiments, the fear, made her want to cry, but she held it together. She owed them that much. When the officials finished, Sarah approached Meredith with a clipboard and a warm smile. "We'd like to take them to a facility for observation, but you're the one they trust, Dr. Lane. Would you consider fostering them while the case is processed? We'll provide support, food, medical care, anything you need." Meredith's answer came before she even thought about it. "They're my family now. I'm not letting them go." Sarah grinned. "Good. They're lucky to have you." As the sun set behind the mountains, Painting the world in gold and pink, Meredith watched the police cars drive away, Robson in custody and Luna at her feet. She knelt beside Luna, running her hand gently over the old scars, the healing wounds, and the strange brand that had brought so much trouble to her door. "You're safe now," she whispered. "Both of you. I promise." "Those." Luna licked her hand. River nuzzled closer, and for the first time, Meredith felt the weight of the past begin to lift. Not gone, but lighter. She had rescued them, but they had rescued her too. That night, with the fire burning and her new family asleep beside her, Meredith let herself imagine a future that wasn't haunted by loss, but filled with purpose, hope, and, finally, love. In the days that followed the ordeal, Meredith moved through her life as if she were inhabiting someone else's story. The police had taken Robson away. The animal control officers had left supplies and their reassurances. And the mountains seemed, for the first time in years, to exhale. The air was crisp but no longer threatening, and the deep snow sparkled under the pale Montana sun. Meredith felt the change in herself every morning. She no longer avoided her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She no longer counted the hours in silence. Now, when she awoke, she was greeted by the soft rumble of Luna's tail thumping the floor and River's high, yipping barks as he tumbled into the kitchen, always hungry, always growing. She had expected the fear and adrenaline from the break-in to linger, but instead she found something else: resolve. It was as if Luna's courage and River's hopefulness had become contagious. Meredith felt her old instincts coming back, not the trauma-driven reflexes from the ER, but the ones that made her reach out instead of retreat. The wall she'd built around her heart after losing her husband and son was not gone, but it had begun to crack, letting in light, laughter, and the faintest hint of forgiveness. She threw herself into caring for Luna and River. Every day brought some new small milestone: River's first bark that sounded almost grown up, Luna finally relaxing enough to nap belly up on the living room rug, both dogs learning the gentle rhythm of a family who trusted each other. But it didn't stop there. Meredith found herself drawn to do more, to help others the way she had helped Luna and River. She began driving into town again, something she hadn't done in months. The first time she left the mountain, her hands trembled on the steering wheel, but Luna sat quietly beside her, and River peeked out from the back seat, and she felt their quiet faith in her strength. At the feed store, she posted a sign: "Seeking help for rescue animals, supplies, volunteers, advice." She struck up awkward conversations with neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years, asking if they'd ever seen stray dogs, if they knew someone who needed a hand, if anyone might want to help her build a proper fence. Word spread. The first visitor was an older man named Walt, who brought sacks of dog food and stories of the huskies he'd raised years ago. Next came a mother and her teenage daughter, both quiet at first, but quickly enchanted by River's puppy antics. Then came Maddie, a local teacher with a rescue spaniel of her own, who offered to help Meredith learn about animal behavior and trauma therapy for dogs. Soon, the once silent cabin was alive with laughter, muddy boots, and the excited yips and barks of not just Luna and River, but a growing collection of rescue dogs. Meredith opened her land, building extra shelters and kennels, planting fresh grass for the dogs to roll in when spring finally melted the snow. With each new animal she welcomed, one with a twisted leg, another too timid to eat unless someone was nearby, Meredith felt her own strength returning. At first, she was nervous, second-guessing her every move. The old fear that she would fail someone again, that another life might slip through her hands, gnawed at her. But Luna and River remained her anchors. On the rough days, Luna would press her nose into Meredith's palm, River would curl up in her lap, and the panic would subside. As her little refuge grew, Meredith reached out to a rescue group in Bozeman. She started joining video calls with animal advocates, learning how to handle medical emergencies, how to socialize abused dogs, how to document every scar and story for the authorities. They asked if she would consider fostering more animals. Meredith said yes before the fear could talk her out of it. She even found herself in town meetings, speaking quietly but clearly about the need for animal welfare, about how easy it was for desperate, frightened creatures to fall through the cracks. Dogs, yes, but also people. She saw herself in the other volunteers, in the children who came to play with the dogs, in the parents who asked for advice, sometimes about animals, sometimes about grief. One chilly afternoon, as she worked to repair a fence with Walt, he paused and looked at her thoughtfully. You're different now, Doc, he said. Not just busier, happier, or maybe just braver. Meredith laughed, a real unguarded sound. Maybe both. I was hiding for a long time. He smiled. You're not hiding now. She looked around, the dogs chasing each other through the snow, Luna rolling happily with River, a little girl tossing a tennis ball for a nervous collie. I guess not, Meredith said softly. I guess I'm finally home too? That night, as she journaled beside the fire, River curled up under her arm and Luna resting at her feet, Meredith wrote down something she hadn't dared to hope for. I am needed. I belong. The next morning, she received a letter from the animal control team in Colorado. The case was ongoing, but Luna and River were officially released from all claims. They were hers as long as she wanted them. Meredith cried as she read it, hugging both dogs tight, whispering, You're safe. Your family. Forever. With spring promising to break through the last grip of winter, Meredith looked out over her small sanctuary. She saw the changes everywhere. In the healthy dogs, the new friendships, the way hope had woven itself back into her heart. She understood now. Rescue was a two-way street. Every dog she saved, every person she welcomed onto her land, every time Luna nudged her awake in the morning or River tumbled over her feet, Meredith was being healed too. She was not just a survivor. She was becoming, again, a healer. And this time, she knew she would not turn away from the world again. Word about Meredith's sanctuary spread through the small towns and scattered ranches of the Montana mountains faster than the snowmelt in spring. What had started as a private refuge for Luna and River was now drawing the attention of people who, like Meredith, were searching for something. Sometimes for hope, sometimes for forgiveness, sometimes just for a reason to keep going. Her mailbox, once stuffed only with junk mail and unpaid bills, now overflowed with letters. Some were from local families asking if she had a place for a lost or abandoned pet. Others were from as far away as Wyoming or Idaho, volunteers wanting to help, offering everything from carpentry skills to homemade dog treats. Meredith was surprised to find that the world she'd tried so hard to shut out had been waiting for her all along. One brisk morning, she was shoveling the last patches of snow from the walk when a blue pickup truck rumbled up the drive. Out stepped a woman in a heavy green coat, holding the hand of a small boy with big, solemn eyes. The boy clutched a battered stuffed animal to his chest, his fingers white with tension. Meredith met them at the fence. You must be Alice, she said gently, remembering the woman's email. And you brought Henry? Alice nodded. We're here about the puppy. But really, we're here for Henry. Her voice trembled. He's been having a hard time? Since his dad left. Meredith understood, instantly, deeply. Come on in, she said, opening the gate. There's someone I want you to meet. Inside the yard, Luna watched from the porch, regal and calm, while River bounced across the snow, a streak of black and tan with ears too big for his head. Meredith knelt and called softly, River, come. Henry's eyes widened as River skidded to a stop in front of him, tail wagging. For a moment, the boy stood frozen. Then River gently nudged the stuffed animal in Henry's hands, his big brown eyes full of curiosity. Henry's mouth twitched. He reached out, uncertain, and River licked his fingers. The puppy wriggled closer, nestling under the boy's arm. The change was immediate and unmistakable. Henry's shoulders eased His breath slowed, and for the first time since arriving, he looked up and met Meredith's eyes. Alice let out a shaky sigh. That's the first time I've seen him smile in months. Meredith knelt beside them, her heart full. Sometimes, she said quietly, the right dog finds you when you need them most. From that day, Henry and Alice became regulars at the sanctuary. Henry learned to walk River on a leash, to brush his fur, to toss a ball across the grass and laugh when River tripped over his own feet. Alice volunteered with feeding and cleaning, slowly drawing comfort from the shared work and the gentle rhythm of life on the mountain. Others came too, a veteran named Mark, who had nightmares so bad he couldn't sleep indoors, found solace building a new shelter in the woods for the most skittish rescues. A group of local teens began visiting every Saturday, learning animal care and responsibility, finding community in the laughter and chaos of the pack. The once silent cabin became a place of stories. People shared their pain, their hopes, their fears, sometimes in words, more often in the quiet company of dogs who listened with perfect, uncritical understanding. Meredith found herself not just caring for animals, but for people too. She listened, offered tea and bread, and slowly the role of healer began to feel right again. One day, Meredith's old hospital called. She stared at the number flashing on her phone, her thumb hovering over decline. But instead she answered, Meredith, it's Sam. Her old colleague's voice was warm, touched with surprise and hope. We heard about what you're doing up there. Some of us are coming through for a conference. Would you talk to us about trauma, about healing? Meredith hesitated. For so long, her story had been a private wound, but as she watched Luna and River chase each other in the yard, as she listened to children's laughter and volunteers' cheerful chatter, she realized her pain had become something else, something that could help others. I'll do it, she said, her voice clear. I'd like that. The day she spoke at the hospital, Meredith stood in a small lecture room, her hands trembling as she clutched her notes. She told the story of Luna and River, of fear and isolation, of the slow, painful return to life. She didn't sugarcoat the darkness, but she didn't dwell in it either. She shared what she had learned, how trauma lingers, how the body remembers even when the mind wants to forget, how healing is not a straight line, but a winding path through moments of trust, of kindness, of simply showing up day after day for someone who needs you, dog or human. As she spoke, she saw nurses wiping their eyes, doctors nodding in silent understanding. When she finished, the room was silent. Then applause broke out, tentative at first, then building, and Meredith felt the warmth of acceptance wash over her. Back at the sanctuary, life blossomed. Children who'd lost parents, soldiers who'd lost comrades, people who'd simply lost themselves, all found their way to Meredith's door. And every time River greeted a visitor, every time Luna curled up beside a trembling child, Meredith saw proof that the world could be stitched back together, one fragile thread at a time. She began to write, not just for herself, but for others. Blog posts about healing, articles about animal rescue and trauma, letters to families who needed hope. Her story, and Luna's, became a spark for others, a quiet call to hold on, to try again. One late afternoon, as the sun set behind the pines, Meredith watched Henry and River napping together under a willow tree. Alice sat nearby, reading while Luna patrolled the edge of the yard, a silent sentinel. Meredith felt a peace she had never expected to find again, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of being anchored to the world in a way that was messy and imperfect, but undeniably real. Looking at the life she had built, she realized that rescue was never a one-way street. The dogs had saved her, the people had saved each other, and together they were building something stronger than any of their individual wounds. As evening settled, Meredith whispered to Luna, "We're home, all of us." And she knew it was true. The last vestiges of winter clung stubbornly to the Montana mountains, but already the world was changing. Patches of earth broke through the snowdrifts, soft with promise. The sun hung higher, brushing everything with gold, and the air was filled with the sharp, clean scent of melting ice and pine needles. For Meredith Lane, each day dawned as proof that the deepest cold, even in the human heart, could give way to warmth and hope again. She stood at the edge of her land, hands tucked deep in her jacket pockets, watching as Luna and River bounded through the last of the snow. River, bigger now and full of exuberant energy, raced ahead, only to circle back and nip at Luna's ear, begging for a chase. Luna, once so wary and wounded, moved with a new freedom, barking playfully and leaping over a fallen branch. Meredith smiled, the sight filling her chest with a gentle ache. It wasn't just her little family that had changed. The sanctuary had become a refuge, not only for animals but for people as well. Every week brought new faces, children who'd learned to trust again by caring for frightened rescues, volunteers who'd found meaning in simple acts of kindness, families who'd healed in small ways just by being here. The walls of Meredith's cabin were no longer silent, but alive with laughter, stories, and the patter of paws across the wooden floor. On a clear morning, she stood in her kitchen brewing coffee, looking out at a yard filled with muddy footprints, toys, and the makeshift agility course built by some of the teenagers who volunteered on weekends. As she poured a mug, a knock sounded at the door, firm, familiar. It was Walt, holding a bundle of mail and a grin. "You got another letter from Denver," he said, handing it over, "and one from that family in Idaho, the one with a three-legged shepherd." Meredith laughed, inviting him in. "Coffee?" "Always," he replied, settling at the table. They sat together, talking easily. Meredith read aloud snippets from the letters, thank yous, updates, even a photograph of rescued pup cuddling a child. She realized, not for the first time, that these were the markers of her new life. Not grand victories, but steady ripples spreading outward, one act of kindness leading to another, and another. Later that afternoon, Meredith gathered Luna and River for a walk through the fields. The sky was a wide, endless blue, the kind that made her believe anything was possible. As they walked, the three of them side by side, the memory of her old pain felt distant, softer, like an old scar that no longer hurt when she touched it. They passed the willow tree where Henry and River had first napped together, the new fence Walt had helped her build, and the tiny patch of wildflowers planted by a girl who'd once been too afraid to leave her mother's side. Each step felt like a chapter in a story, one she'd been writing with her choices, her courage, and the unexpected arrivals at her door. At the edge of the woods, Meredith paused and knelt beside Luna. "You saved me, you know?" she said quietly, fingers curling into the thick fur behind Luna's ear. "I thought I was rescuing you." "But you rescued me. Both of you did." River pressed his wet nose into her hand, and Luna rested her head on Meredith's shoulder. The connection between them was deep and wordless, a trust forged in shared survival, a love that asked for nothing but presence and care. In that quiet, sacred space, Meredith let her thoughts drift over the last 2 years, the isolation, the loss, the storm that brought Luna and River to her door. She remembered the terror of Robson's attack, the dread of losing her new family, and the trembling hope that followed when she decided to stay and fight for them. She thought of the people who'd come into her life since then, each one a reminder that healing was possible, that broken things could be made whole. Back at the cabin, the sanctuary was bustling. Volunteers repaired fencing, a child helped brush a shy retriever, and a pair of siblings planted flower bulbs in the soft, thawing soil. Alice was reading in the sun, while Henry and River chased each other, laughter and barking echoing across the fields. The energy was infectious, simple, joyful, real. Meredith watched it all, heart brimming with gratitude and wonder. Once, she'd believed her story had ended in tragedy. Now she saw it was just a painful chapter in a book still being written. As dusk settled and the last light faded from the sky, Meredith gathered everyone, human and canine. On the porch, they shared soup bread, and stories. As she looked around at her odd, beautiful family, she spoke quietly but clearly. Sometimes, she said, the rescue's walking on four legs. Sometimes they're battered and afraid, and sometimes they save you in ways you never expected. But every time we open the door, every time we let someone in, we give ourselves another chance at healing, at hope, at life. A hush fell over the group, and in that silence, something unspoken was understood, that none of them were alone anymore. As the stars came out, Meredith, Luna, and River walked through the snow one last time that night. The world was still, the sky infinite, the cold softened by their closeness, and Meredith knew, deep in her bones, that this was what it meant to be whole. Not unbroken, not untouched by pain, but alive and connected, walking forward together. If you're hearing this story, maybe it's a sign that someone or something needs you too. Maybe the door you open will save a life, or maybe it will save your own. Don't be afraid to take that first step. Don't be afraid to love again or to let yourself be loved. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And if you can, support your local animal rescue or mental health organization, because you never know who's waiting for a second chance.